What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Crossover U College Hoops Talk podcast, which you can find, as always, on the Crossover Media Network. My name is Kanaye and I'm joined with Josh with Sheldon. Today, we're going to be bringing you a lot of stuff in this episode just regarding the amount of guys who decided to withdraw from the NBA draft and return to college for another year, coming back to school, just something that you really haven't seen in past years and something that's definitely a big talking point right now. On top of that, we'll also get into some teams that we are not as high on as some other people who cover the sport, as well as some teams that we are high on that don't seem to be getting the attention that we think that they deserve to. So let's get it started with some of the draft deadline decisions, just how that's kind of been one of the bigger talking points right now. Josh, I'll ask you first. What are your immediate takeaways from the amount of guys who pulled out of the draft?
Shock, honestly. I really didn't expect nor foresee half the guys coming back. And that's including the guys that we were talking about. I think the biggest talk should be LeBaron Philon. He was a guy that I saw could have been a late lottery, high leverage type of guy in the NBA. He had a great freshman year, but I never really felt like he was putting things together enough to be in that scenario, but the NBA saw it differently. He closed the door 2 weeks before he admitted to coming back. He was completely gone. No one thought he was coming back. And then out of the blue, at the very last second, basically a buzzer beater, if anything, he comes back to Natives. And the team is completely changed as he is perhaps the biggest comeback player. And then at the same time, there's still Yaxel, who we both said wasn't coming back. The Hod, who we also both said wasn't coming back. And me personally, I thought the Hod should have stayed. He fit a really good first-round pick role as a freshman. He was great in the combine. He showed great results, and he just came back. I guess the jungle needed him more. And then even guys that we were like somewhat, like could come back, Milos Uzan or Tika Owe, Alex Condon, they just came back. Like they all decided to return, and that's not even mentioning Darren Williams, PJ Haggerty. The list honestly does go on and on. There were so many guys that in other years as well wouldn't have came back, but they did. And it's just, like I said before, it's a complete shock.
Yeah, and I mean, you go back even just 5 years ago, the amount of guys who came back and the names that did, they would have never had a second thought about coming back to school. They would have stayed in the draft, went through the whole process, and lived with the result. I think that's accredited to in terms of those guys coming back. You all have to thank NIL for it. I mean, but what NIL has done for the sport and being able to bring back a lot of the household names, the big name players, it makes it so that, hey, you can't fault a kid where they could be making $2 to $3 million right now in school, playing for a top flight program in college basketball where you go to the NBA draft, you're not guaranteed to be a first round pick. You might end up on a two-way deal where you're going back and forth between the NBA and the G League, and you're not making seven figures the way you would be if you come back to school. And again, I just think that's completely changed the way these kids think in terms of their, not only one, where they're going to be playing college basketball, but two, their pro decisions. I mean, you go back several years, you do not see the likes of guys like Boogie Flan, Todd Pettiford, Yaxel Landenberg even consider coming back to school, and that's exactly what ended up happening.
And if I can expand on that further, 5 years ago, and I mentioned this to Kanaye as well, the list would have been even larger of players that would have left or would have tried to get to the NBA. Because at the end of the day, being an undrafted free agent in the NBA was probably better 5 years ago than returning to another year, especially if it's your last year going into college. Like Ian Jackson, who was a freshman last year, probably would have left. You would have seen a guy like Jalen Love gone in. Nate Biddle, who tested the waters, but was very likely going to come back, and really no one saw him going in. Completely opposite story. Like, there would have been 10 to 20 more guys that really didn't look like they were going to be going into the NBA that left. And I think that's a huge turnaround, especially for, once again, the guys that turned around and said, I like what the NBA is offering, I like what I'm seeing, but I'm not there yet. It's just not enough, and I want to make my money in college basketball and then do it in the NBA. Because Uzan wouldn't have even questioned coming back 5 years ago. As great as a culture Houston has, it doesn't take the level of the NBA has. It doesn't really make sense still that guys like him are staying. Owe is staying. He honestly looked pretty good in the later half. It was looking like Owe was going to stay, and then he didn't. So I feel like there's just so much to especially going into the future, because this is the long-term game that NIL offers. It offers the ability for teams to have continuity that has never existed in the college basketball sphere.
Yeah, and I think continuity is great for college basketball because I mean that's what makes the sport so great. You watch a player come in their freshman year, play a role maybe, and then you see them play 2 3 years, maybe play up until their senior year, and you watch them grow. They develop into an All American, top flight player in the sport. And I mean, I will say it's great to be able to get some of the bigger names, household names coming back to school. Like I talked about my Todd Pettiford return video, which if you haven't seen, definitely check that out. Todd was one of my favorite players to watch this past season, and I very much felt that he was worth taken in the lottery. I understand he's undersized, but he's a great athlete. He's showcased tough shot making. There were several instances this season where Todd went out and single handedly won Auburn some really close games. Of course, he didn't have the greatest Final Four game against Florida, but I mean, outside of that, he showed up for every big game they had this past season. And it's nice to have one of your favorite players to watch return the sport. But, I definitely think it kind of is a double edged sword where before NIL and the transfer portal kind of came about, it was really a conversation of guys, at least people who cover the sport saying, it's tough to get guys to stay when they want to chase pro careers. And it's almost kind of was a problem in the sport where it was tough, really, really tough to get guys to come back to school. And now it's kind of worked in the reverse direction where everyone is coming back to school. And maybe it's, taking away minutes from some of the incoming freshmen and other guys who maybe played a role and are expecting to start the next year. But then guys come back from the draft, they transfer to another program, and guys already at the school get recruited over. Or guys, thinking they're going to step into a starting role out of the program they were already at. They have a guy who tested the draft waters from that Pastors team, and they think, hey, that guy's gone. I'm going to be able to play a big role. But then the guy comes back. So I definitely want to ask you personally if you think this is kind of good or bad for the sport in terms of how this draft decision process the last 2 years really has kind of started to move.
I know this is kind of a controversial take as of right now, and I know that we are both haters of NIL, but we have our strong criticisms. This is one of the best things NIL has ever done, honestly. Imagine if this was in place a few years back, seeing guys that had a lot more eligibility than they do right now, by the way, getting that additional year. Like, I don't know how far it could have gone or how far it can go, but I would love to have every year at least one possible lottery team or one possible lottery player come back. Like, that would be so nice to have some sort of returning talent that stays one more year, because at the end of the day, it's not the worst thing if you, as a freshman, get your experience, test at the draft waters, see that it looks good, but you want to be higher, and then you come back. Like, yeah, you could have been a first round pick, and that's probably what LeBaron Filing was going to be, or Yaxel, Yaxel freshman, like the Hod probably, but just those types of players that want to be higher, that want to have the opportunity to play on a winning caliber team, but also could just win a natty like next year in the college basketball world. Like, that's not something that you should be annoyed at. And I think that it's even for top picks, like, let me level it down in a way. Imagine the opportunity to win a national championship in college basketball in 1 year versus waiting 5 to 10 years for a rebuild just to have the chance to do that in the NBA. And at the same time, you're making more money in that 1 year of NIL than you would be for most of that rebuild. It's a little hard to believe it because nothing's really happened like this before. It's not really been a top 5 pick that's said, I'm going to stay in college because I want to win that natty and make that money, when they obviously have the better choice in the NBA. But I could see it in the decade happening because of what NIL is doing, what the portal is doing, and what the new legacy, per se, of college basketball is creating. And I'm all for it.
Most definitely. And I do think it's done a lot of good, like you just talked about, of guys wanting to come back. I definitely think there's a lot of cases in the past where before NIL was a thing, where guys probably needed to stay another year or two, really just to hone in on their skills fundamentally and to mature more as a person. I think college basketball does so much for you in both those aspects of the game. And I think you look at the numbers of what guys made in NIL. I mean, the League Alerts on their Instagram posted yesterday that Cooper Flagg made $28 million in NIL. Now, granted, I think the bulk of that $28 million was probably from the outside deals separate from what Duke gave Coop. that being his New Balance deal and the Gatorade deal, and I'm sure whatever else he had outside of what Duke was giving him, probably made up the bulk of that 28. But still, I think two great examples from this past year's championship team, the Florida Gators. Thomas Howe, Alex Condon, both probably had a chance to be first round picks this past year, but they knew what they were worth. The number Todd Golden threw out to them, and they both decided, hey, I'm going to come back to school, try to get, go for a repeat, help my program out. We reloaded, have a really good chance to make it back to a Final Four, win another national championship. On top of that, they both have a chance to play their way into being mid first round picks, maybe even a lottery pick if you're Thomas Howe, which again, it's really good for the sport. Like I talked about, there's so many instances that I've had growing up watching college basketball where I see a guy and I'm like, hey, he probably should stay another year in school. But before NIL, you're risking making money professionally playing basketball just because NBA teams, which is another point to get into, they don't like older guys coming out of college. And I do think a lot of what, in terms of the bad, which might come out of it, which I mentioned with guys coming back and kind of taking away minutes and opportunities for incoming freshmen and other guys who've kind of stuck with the program. I think a lot of that kind of is attributed to just NBA teams really misevaluating talent coming out of college. I've been vocal about it in the past on this podcast about how I completely disagree with how NBA teams view players coming out of college basketball. I think they bank too much on guys who maybe aren't as proven, didn't put out the tape of some of the other top flight college basketball players. And just because they're younger, just because they think they have more potential or a higher ceiling, they go after those guys. They view them as lottery picks. And a lot of times it doesn't end up panning out. And I think it's a lot better to take use your draft pick on someone who's proven in big moments, in big games, won a lot in college. Yeah, might be a little bit older, might not have as high of a ceiling or as much potential, but he's going to be able to come in and play a role right away, contribute to winning, like they did in college. A guy like Tahad, I think, is a perfect example. I very much feel that he's worth a lottery pick, but NBA teams don't view that the same way just because he's undersized. But I think it's important to consider what he did coming off the bench for Auburn this past year on a team that made it to the Final Four. I mean, he averaged nearly 12 points and 3 assists coming off the bench when he probably could have started almost every single Power 5 school in the country. So he has no ego. Just considering that, again, he could have started on a lot of teams in college basketball this past year, but accepted a role coming off the bench, being the sixth man, and was efficient. Well, maybe not as efficient as maybe NBA scouts would have liked, but he was productive. He showed up in big games, hit a lot of big shots, and I very much feel that he was worth taking in the first round. NBA scouts don't agree with me. I'm not an NBA scout, so maybe they know better, but I think Nick Clifford is a perfect example of the type of guy I'm talking about, who is older, but has a really, really high ceiling, maybe not as high, or a really high floor, maybe not as high of a ceiling as some of the other prospects in this year's draft, but is going to come in and be able to impact winning right away.
Yes, I actually like that one a lot because we saw last year with Dalton Netsch. Great player, insane upside, but just you need him on a team that can use him right away. That's kind of where I feel the NBA sees with these players because, in my opinion, Dalton should be a lottery pick. The Lakers stole. I get it, Dalton never really had the impact he should have had in the Lakers, but I think that future years can definitely do
great example.
At least for teams that are midway through or towards the tail end of their rebuilds to go pick those players as well. Like, I get it for a team like the Wizards who are just starting their rebuild or are like trying to work out how they're going to go through it. But teams that are multiple years into the rebuild, like the Pistons, for example, it would be useful to go and spend a lottery pick on a guy like a Clayton or a Clifford or Danny Wolf, even older players who have shown it, because you can get the talent right there. And I don't know why the NBA does this. And Kanaye is also correct, I think, on why they attack freshmen who haven't really shown that much success as high lottery picks. I get it that there's a lot of opportunity. I get it that all 5 picks that are coming in, supposedly top 5 picks, are all freshmen. But, those guys typically show it. LeBaron didn't fully show it. Tahad could have used more time. I feel like there's definitely places for them in the NBA, and I think that they both probably could have and should have went this year. But I think there shouldn't be this, I don't want to say shame, but there shouldn't be this purge on having another season. Because you're going to be a sophomore, you're going to be a lottery pick most likely now, and you're going to have so much more experience, and now you get more money in NIL, and now you get an opportunity to run it back and win that chip. And you could be on a championship winning team in the NBA within 2 years of your draft. I feel like in a way it's a secret win because it's nice getting drafted as a freshman. It's nice getting that like rookie sensation idea of I just went from high school to the NBA like this, but maybe take a little second and play a little bit more at the lower level because you can just it's that gain of opportunity that college basketball is providing through NIL, I guess, but it's looking really nice if you're going to ask me. I think maybe this is a really nice thing to have.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I think you hit on pretty much all the points there. That I mean, I do think there's a lot of downsides which come with NIL that which we've both been vocal about on this podcast. But this is one of the good things, and just being able to retain the household big time players in college basketball, and have them return for another season. Where years ago, honestly, not too far back into the past, this would have not been the case at all. And I will say I'm willing to say that a lot of the college grades over the past few years, if they were given the opportunities that a lot of these lottery picks have been given, then they probably could have went on and had better careers and found roles on teams and contributed to winning rather than fizzling out of the league in a few years like we've seen some of these guys do. It's just, I mean, Jalen Brunson is a perfect example. He's a guy who I could not understand how he fell out of the first round. Of course, didn't fully understand the mindset of NBA scouts and GMs at the time. But as someone who watched college basketball, someone who was a two-time national champ, national player of the year, at the time being, I could not understand how someone of that caliber would go and fall out of the first round. And he was given the opportunity to be that guy on the Knicks. And what has he done with it? I mean, I understand the Knicks just lost in the playoffs, but I mean, he's completely rewritten the narrative around guys in the second round. I mean, he's arguably the king of New York right now in New York sports. And I mean, he's balled. He's completely brought back the New York Knicks franchise. That him and that full Nova squad on the Knicks. But I mean, again, there's so many guys that I can name off the top of my head who I felt like could have played in the NBA 10, 12 years, but just because they weren't given those opportunities because they were older or went in the second round or were undrafted, didn't get those, and now are maybe playing overseas or just retired altogether.
And I think we're going to see it this year with like RJ Davis, Caleb Love. These are going
Yeah,
to be late second round picks, if even, that I think are key contributors on a high leverage team. They don't need to be used a lot, but when they are, they can come in as that seventh or eighth man where they just didn't exist before. You're putting them on a rookie contract. Like from the NBA perspective, this is like getting a free gift in a way. And I'm glad that teams do this not too often, but they get these opportunities. Yeah, Brunson's probably the best example recently. There's not that many Brunsons, but I guess Jokic is kind of in there, but he's more of a foreign prospect. But every once in a while, you get these opportunities. And I feel like more GMs in general in the NBA, and maybe this is more a problem on the NBA's perspective, the talent that they're looking for shouldn't come from just checking how old they are and what they did in high school. Because college matters so much more than they think. And it's far more important nowadays considering like what we're talking about with these players coming back. Imagine if NFL players said that they wanted an additional year. I mean, considering they're already not allowed to get drafted as a freshman or sophomore, but what if juniors and seniors came back for an additional year if they could, based on that matter and saying, no, I don't want to go to the NFL? That's kind of, I won't say it's the equivalent, but it would be such a big problem for the NFL. And I think it's kind of a big problem for the NBA because there needs to be some sort of change in how players are drafted so that this doesn't happen, or the NBA can keep that and college basketball can continue to take and take and take from younger talent, but also talent that shows great opportunity, but could also just win a check right then and there, and could also just make $5 million right now, and
right.
not have to wait 5, 10 years when they might not have that time. I don't know if Yaxel will have that time in the NBA. I don't know if Xavier Lee will have that time. Boogie Flan will have that time. They should keep what they have, win now, so they don't have to suffer later or try and win later. I think that there might be the higher leverage in staying. And that's the big message that this NBA draft deadline has shown to us.
Most definitely, yeah. I think overall, the big takeaway here is pretty much the points you just said. And I think it is good, really good for the sport and being able to get these guys back. And hey, if you have to pay them $2-3 million to stay in school, then I mean, I guess it is what it is. I have my thoughts on there being a salary cap, but if it's keeping some of our favorite players around, then hey, I'm all for it. But I think right now is a good segue to get into our next segment. But just really briefly, before we get into that, if you like this podcast or anything else you see on this channel, please do anything you can to engage with our videos, whether it's liking them, subscribing to our channel, or just telling other people about it. It really does help with being able to continue to grow what we do here at the Crossover. So now let's get into some of the teams which we are low on as opposed to some of the other people who cover the sport, as well as some teams which we are high on. That people aren't talking about as much as we feel like they should be. I think it's good to start with some teams that we're low on as opposed to what the mainstream media thinks right now. First team is Texas Tech. I understand they are bringing back JT Toppin, who is going to be one of the front runners to win the National Player of the Year this year. But if we're being honest here, what do they really have outside of JT Toppin? They lost a lot in the portal. They lost some guys at graduation. And in terms of the guys they got out of the portal, Donovan Atwell is probably the biggest name, but he averaged 13 points at the mid-major level. He's going to be tasked to do a lot on ball and shooting, and he wasn't the most efficient shooter at UNCG this past season. And honestly, I understand they have JT Toppin. He's going to be really, really good, but I could very much see this Texas Tech team being somewhat similar to what we saw with Luka Garza.
Yeah, I definitely get around to that. I mean, it's him, and then there is also Christian Anderson, but they're losing so much talent that I think they could have kept. Federico left. Elijah Hawkins technically graduated, but could have had eligibility. They might change that depending on how things go. Darian Williams was the player that I thought should have came back. That showed great promise, and I think Texas Tech definitely could have paid him depending on how much he really wanted. He ends up going to end high on Texas Tech coming. We both saw them being possible number one preseason to start the year.
Yeah.
But the more you think about it, and the more you look into the team itself, the depth just isn't there right now. And I don't know if there's time to change that or if there's enough going around, because even in the Big 12, there are better teams. BYU is a better team. Houston's a better team. I think Kansas State can have a higher leverage than Texas. Like, there's just too much going on for Texas Tech to put me in that position to rank them. I just don't see.
And in terms of other people who cover college basketball, a lot of people, I've seen them as high as top 5. I personally have them probably in the 10 to 15 range now outside the top 10 with some of these draft deadline decisions being announced. And yeah, I just think you look at the other teams that are in the top 10, roster makeup, it's night and day between the other teams in the top 10 and what Texas Tech has. I just don't think, again, I think a lot of it is people giving them the benefit of the doubt of them retaining JT Toppin and him being a National Player of the Year candidate. Yeah, he's going to be really, really good this year. Will most definitely be in the running for that award. But again, it screams Luka Garza at Iowa to me. I just don't see Texas Tech being all the competitive in competing for a Big 12 title, nor being able to get to a Final Four. I don't see it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Do you want to do the second team?
Yeah, second team is honestly very similar in their scenario as Texas Tech. That team being Michigan. I know I made a video talking about Yaxel Lendenborg's decision to withdraw from the NBA draft and play for Dusty May at Michigan and Ann Arbor this season. But again, I really don't like. I think Dusty May's done a fair job in the portal, but it's really reliant on guys to be better than what they were at their previous spot homes. Ellie Cadeau's a perfect example. I think Michigan's season will be completely tied hand in hand with the improvement Ellie Cadeau makes as a player coming from UNC. If he's the same guy he was at North Carolina, Michigan will not be anywhere close to competing to get to a Final Four this year, in my opinion. I just think he talks about how, at least his brother did. His brother's a streamer, by the way, if you don't know, something I didn't know until this offseason. But he talked about a lot of the reasons why Elliott felt that maybe he wasn't the right fit at UNC was because Hubert Davis doesn't like taking mid-range shots. Now, I do like mid-range shots, but if we're being honest here, I don't think mid-range shots in this state of the way basketball is played are the most efficient shots to take. I think your best bet is in the paint and from behind the three-point line. And if it's a close game, it's crunch time, that's a different story. But if that's something that your game is solely reliant on, especially in the world of college basketball, it's very more so reliant on sets and actions to get guys open looks rather than prioritizing isolation ball, then I don't know if that's really going to be all that different for Elliott at Michigan. And I do think Yaxel Lendenborg will be really, really good this year. I definitely think he's going to be in the running for the Wooden Award. He might actually be my pick to win it this year going into the preseason. I'm really, really high on Yaxel. I think he has a chance to be better than what Danny Wolf was this past year. But again, outside of Yaxel, there's a lot of questions on this team. We don't know how good Morez Johnson's going to be. We don't know how good Ade Mar is going to be. We don't know which one of those two guys is going to start the five. And if, what they have coming off the bench isn't all too exciting either. And they're going to need, again, guys to make leaps. And I just really don't know how much of a ceiling there is for Michigan right now. A lot of people have them top 10 now with the Axel coming back. I have them maybe just on the cusp of it, but I largely see them falling probably down to the 15 to 20 range this year.
I can definitely view the same. I think Kanaye is a little tougher on Michigan than I am. I do think Yaxel can fill that role. He gives such a strong opening to this team, and I think Ademar can kind of fit a nice role. The problem is that I think Dusty May is trying to rebuild the Michigan he had last year with the Twin Towers mixture of Golden and Wolf. I don't think it's gonna. I just don't think that either role is gonna get flipped. I think Yaxel is about the same in terms of talent overall as Denny Wolf, but he doesn't have the passing. He doesn't act like a point guard. He's truly just a strong big man who can definitely lay down in terms of getting rebounds and getting points to the paint, but doesn't have the assist ratio that I think Dusty would like. And Ademara is just too like he's not. He doesn't have the strength that Vlad Golden has. Vlad Golden would get hit consistently, but he would keep scoring. He was the type of guy that just kept going for Dusty May, and I don't think Ademara has that in him to be that guy. And then beyond that, the guard play isn't there. I think kicking out Donaldson to bring in Cadeau is a little bit of a downgrade, depending on how Cadeau performs. Same thing with Morris Johnson. I think that there would have been a great spot for Roddy Gale to get additional minutes. I think he still becomes the main bench guy. You don't want to see that in a guy like him. He's a guy that can be pushed to be another Trey Donaldson, which probably would have made the team better overall. Do I think Michigan is horrible? No. They are probably still a top 10 team in my mind, but more like 8, 9, maybe 10 even. And I'm just not ready to put them any higher until I see true physical evidence on the court. And until then, I'm pretty skeptical because, yeah, Yaxel coming back is a huge deal for Michigan. It definitely elevates them from like a top 20 to a top 10 team. But I'm not ready to hop on the boat. And I don't think it's right to do that.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I can hear you out being a little bit higher on Michigan than me. I definitely do think that it's not a recipe for success if Dusty May is trying to replicate that double center pick and roll with Wolf and Golden the way he had it last year. I just don't think the personnel he has this year on the roster is really capable of doing it to the efficiency that they were able to have last year. But yeah, overall, that's a team that we're not as high on as some other people who cover the sport. And now to get in some teams that we're a lot higher on than most other people. The first one being BYU. Honestly, could be a little bit of a stretch here saying we're higher on BYU than a lot of other people in the country. I know most people, pretty much the consensus is that BYU is a preseason top 10 team. I personally have a really, really tough time keeping them out of my top 5. I do have them on my updated top 5 now, which, by the way, since those draft deadline decisions, me and Josh have on our own had to make our revamped updated top 10s once again. I'm sure it's probably going to change again sometime soon. But I just really, really like BYU's roster. I've seen people have them as low as 10 in their preseason polls. And again, I think they're very worthy of being a top 3 team, maybe, at highest in top 5. I think around the 5 to 7 range is probably fair for them in my eyes. But I just love what they have on paper. You're bringing in Rob Wright, who's going to play the point guard role really well. I mean, he's great at attacking guys off the dribble. He's going to be a good playmaker. Richie Saunders, like we've talked about in the past, one of the most underrated players in the sport. You could probably drop Richie Saunders on a lot of the teams in the top 10. He would honestly probably be the best player on that roster. And he's going to be great at the 2 for them. They got AJ DeBanza, who pretty much everyone, including me and Josh, thinks he's going to be as good as advertised. And Kennard Davis Jr. going to fill a role as being one of the best glue guys in the sport. No ego whatsoever. He's fine. He's going to be fine playing fourth fiddle in that offense. And when he's needed to, he can definitely do a lot production-wise and scoring. And then you have a great kind of tandem at the 5 spot between Kay Bakita to play small ball in their starting 5. And you got Xavier Stanton coming off the bench to fill that role when needed.
Definitely. I mean, I guess the biggest concern was, and the reason why a lot of people are putting BYU lower is just AJ Jabanson himself. We don't know if he's capable of being like a Flag or Zion or any of these hyped up top prospects. And listen, he won't be that guy, but he doesn't need to be that guy because Saunders exists, Kieta exists, Davis exists, Rob Wright exists. This team is so stacked that it almost becomes a talking point of, is Devancy even going to average the most amount of points per game? Is he actually going to be the best guy on the team? Because the team is so well-rounded that he doesn't need to be the best guy every night. There could be nights where Richie Saunders turns into the Richie Saunders we saw last year at the end of the season, and everything is all right. And I think that makes BYU a championship caliber team. I don't think they're going to win it, to be honest with you, but I can see them being a preseason number 3, number 4 team and could walk into March with a 1 seed. I don't think it's out of the question. I think it's definitely on that path if they go for it. And I like Kevin Young. I think the way he sets up his entire system, because he is from the NBA. He is an assistant coach for the Suns before he came in last year. I think it's made not just for obviously the NBA system that he's trying to bring into, but it works great transitioning to college as well because he understands both games perfectly. And I think that additional part makes everything work so well. And if I can, I was going to say because one of the interesting things I found about that is the Banza and BYU are playing on a 4-point court at BYU
Yeah,
Stadium,
I saw that.
which I think is such a unique thing. I've been told a lot of college basketball teams and even NBA teams do that more NBA than college because it not for the shooting long range because I don't expect this ever going to be a 4-point line in the future, but it's for setting up screens and other defensive plays to allow for easier movement of the ball into the paint. Because playing out in the backcourt kind of works for a team like BYU, and therefore allows them to strategize well beyond the hash, so they can set up plays that don't get shown a lot from other teams. That's such an advantage that I think no other team knows about, and gives Kevin Young and gives BYU that advantage to be a better team overall. So very underrated, really strong. If there's any reason to be high on them beyond Devanza, I guess it could be that as well. But this is the best BYU team, honestly, better than Jimmer Fredette days. I'm going to be honest with you right now. I think Devanza could be the best Cougar to ever play ball, and that kind of sucks to say because I love Jimmer Fredette, but like, this team looks amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I pretty much agree with all your points there. I love Kevin Young. I love his system. I feel like very much last year the BYU roster was filled with a lot of scrappy guys. Maybe not as talented. It's the complete opposite this year. They got the talent, they got the firepower, they got the stars, big name guys. They're going to be really, really. I think they're going to be really, really good. They're going to be electric to watch. I will say they probably should have scheduled a little bit better with their out of conference games. Of course, that's still up in the air of them adding some more teams to that. Right now, their best game is against UConn in TD Garden in Boston. In November. So, of course, that's probably the biggest game for them right now to see how good they really are. Super excited for that. But again, yeah, I think BYU is going to be really good this year, and they're definitely gonna make some noise out in Provo. But the next thing we want to get into, want to make it clear here, us both here at the Crossover U, we are on the Kansas State bandwagon right now. No one is talking about Kansas State right now. Field of 60 has completely left them out of their power rankings. I believe some other people don't have them anywhere close to their top 30. This is a team that I think people need to start paying attention to. They've had some great ads in the transfer portal, like PJ Haggerty, who is, I forget if it's him or Yaxel, who's the number one rated transfer. It might be PJ last I checked. But they got him. They got Nate Johnson, Marcus Johnson, who, like we've talked about in the past, unique build for someone. It's something you don't normally see in college basketball. Is a little bit of a bigger stature, but let me tell you, really skilled, has a great bag in the post. Very reminiscent of Zach Randolph. If you ever watched Memphis Grizzlies basketball, and let me tell you, if Kansas State has any essence of national relevancy this year, Marcus Johnson is going to be a fan favorite across the sport. On top of that, you got Abdi Bashir Jr. coming over from Monmouth, who has a chance to absolutely light it up from three once again this year. Of course, we got to see how some of their transfers translate to the high major level, but this is a team that needs to be talked about. Jordan Tang knows his job, his seat's getting a little warm, and I think he's going to put together a really, really big season.
And we've seen Tang do this before, which I think is the biggest reason why so many people are putting this team down because Tang unfortunately missed last year. He picked guys that were just bullies. Coleman Hawkins wasn't really the type of guy to bomb their place. Doug McDaniel had problems at Michigan, and bringing him in just didn't really work either. And Chor had his own problems, which made him leave the season early. He ended up transferring to Mississippi State. So I feel like those issues can probably be exercised in this scenario. Haggerty is a little bit of an issue on the perspective of that, but you're giving him most likely the money and the starting role he asked for, so you shouldn't be too annoyed if you're going to be honest. And the surrounding guys are very nice people. Nate Johnson, Abdi Bashir. If Marcus Johnson's anything like DJ Burns, which the comparisons definitely starting to grow on the guy, then I definitely could see a really cohesive squad that can really turn around a lot of those bad narratives that Jerome Tang's previous teams have had. Listen, Tang made an Elite Eight in 2023, and everyone forgets it ever happens. And I think that that's not a fluke. That is Jerome Tang doing what he does. I think this team will be the best team in the state of Kansas, honestly.
Yeah, I love that take, honestly. If you're able to take a team to the Elite Eight with a point guard that is 5'7", 5'8", you are not a fluke whatsoever. It's no slight to Marcus Noel. Marcus Noel was a hooper. Guy was tough. But again, I just think Jerome Tang's gotten a little bit unlucky last few years with some of his plucks out the portal. This year, like you mentioned, the only real diva you're bringing in is PJ Haggerty, but you're pretty much giving him everything he asked for coming out of the portal. And I mean, again, really outside of that, you're bringing in high character guys from what we know. And I think PJ Haggerty is going to be in a great position where he's going to be able to play make a lot and dish out to shooters pretty much everywhere around him between Nate Johnson, who can also attack closeouts really well, get into the paint. A lot of paint touches there. On top of D. Bashir Jr., who's one of the top 3-point shooters in the country this past season. You got Marcus Johnson handled down in the low post. I really like the way Jerome Tang has constructed this roster. The depth does concern me a little bit, but I wouldn't be shocked if they go on a run in March whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it just to, again, make it clear, we are on the Kansas State bandwagon here at the Crossover U. You heard it here first. If Kansas State ends up being one of the premier teams in the country this year, you know who came out and supported them first, who was first to the K-State bandwagon. So it was right here at the Crossover U. But next team.
Don't talk to us.
Yeah, yeah. The next thing we want to talk about, I believe, was Georgetown, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I really do like the job Ed Cooley has done in the transfer portal. I think he's really starting to bring the Georgetown program back to its illustrious past of being one of the premier teams in the country. But again, I'll let Josh speak on some of the ads that Cooley's done and what he thinks Georgetown's going to do this year.
Definitely. And I will say there is a little bit of an upside here that can be removed from Jaden Epps leaving. I get it that he kind of not necessarily equals what's being brought in, but could have, depending on how things work. So that's kind of why Georgetown is not being rated so high, but they are a top 30, top 40 team. But we probably put them in the top 20, top 25. I would say this. I think KJ Lewis is probably the biggest reason why he is supposed to be the main ball handler. He's going to probably work with Malik Mack, who could blossom into a great star in the Big East next year. I think Cooley is starting to get things together. They looked good last year as well, and then Sorber got injured, and they still were all right. I think this is definitely an upward trend for the team as a whole, and the transfer class that they brought in is very underrated, and I think can be a top, I don't want to say 3 team, maybe 5 team in the Big East next year.
Yeah, I mean, on top of KJ Lewis, you're bringing in Langston Love from Baylor, who he's gonna bring some shooting. He'll do a lot in being able to play that role. You're also bringing in Vince Iwachukwu from St. John's, who guy who probably could have got more minutes than he did this past year for Rick Pitino, but I definitely think now in a much bigger role. They're losing Thomas Sorber to the draft, so he's gonna have to probably start at the 5, I would assume. So he definitely has a chance to break out there. I know you mentioned Jaden Epps losing him. You lose Drew Fielder too. But you also get Jordan Burks from UCF, who I also think has a chance to break out, playing the 4. Might get some minutes at the 3. We'll see what ends up happening with that. But I really like the way Ed Cooley's constructed this roster. I'm not the biggest Ed Cooley guy, but I do think he is a good coach. And don't be shocked if Georgetown is in the top 5 in the Big East this year.
And a tournament team as well. I think
yeah, most definitely.
Very likely.
And so the next thing we want to talk about is Miami. Miami, I mean, Jay Lucas, the job he's done coming over from Duke and taking over Miami. I mean, he's done really good. And it's some of the guys they've gotten. I think the number one guy who comes to mind, I'm blanking off the top of my head. Maybe Josh can remind me there.
I think it's probably, it really is a mixture of guys. I think Donaldson is probably the best choice.
Yeah, Trey Donaldson. Yeah, right.
But there's a lot of guards that are fitting into Jay Lucas' system, which, by the way, he has the great experience of being a Duke assistant coach. He has that level of previous knowledge, and he has also previous NBA experience as well, so you can work that Kevin Young style. I think it's definitely a great breath of fresh air from moving on from the previous generation, basically, of Miami because of how long the previous coach was there. But I think that there definitely needs to be more respect given to this Miami team. And this is not really just about what the transfers are and who Lucas is bringing in, but more or less the system that he is starting to grow with. Unfortunately, they're not going to be able to see much of it. Duke is not playing Miami, by the way, because of the short system that they're growing. But regardless of that matter, I think they're still going to be a fighter in the ACC. They're probably going to be like a Georgetown, like we said, not a top three team, but likely in that top five that will be a tournament squad that I think can change a lot of minds. I don't know if they're going to be a top 25 team walking in my words, but they're definitely in that role. And I definitely don't think it's fair to leave them out of any top right.
Most definitely. I mean, between Trey Donaldson and Malik Renew, who was
Yes,
the
Malik
one guy
Reeves.
I was blanking on, I should have, Trey Donaldson is the best player they're bringing in, but Malik Renew and Trey, I think will make a great 1-2 punch in Miami. Trey, you can make the argument, was one of the better guards in the country in the last month of the season. I mean, that Big Ten tournament run he had, where he essentially hit, what was it, like 2, 3 game winners in a row. I mean, just
Yes,
ridiculous. And really, really great tournament too. Had a great performance against UC San Diego, and I think he definitely has a chance to break out. Now he has a lot to prove, considering that Dusty May kind of forced him out of Ann Arbor for Elliot Cadeau, which adds pressure going back to Michigan on Elliot this upcoming season. But I think, yeah, like you mentioned, Jay Lucas and Miami, they'll probably be top five in the ACC. Nothing crazy in terms of what they're going to be competing for on a national scale, but they'll definitely be bringing back a lot of energy to that Miami program.
without a doubt.
Now, the last team we were going to talk about, I forget off the top of my head. Do you remember by chance?
Yeah, I got you. Actually, that was Iowa. Iowa.
Iowa, yeah.
That's definitely a big one.
Yeah, Iowa, I think.
I think I'm no offense, I'm kind of the higher guy on that team. I think it's really more or less on the mixture of Bennett Sturts being, in all reality, a Power Five guy who was shafted into being a D2 player for most of his career, and Ben McCullum being completely capable of winning a Natty Day. And it definitely shows he won, I think, two Natties in his time in D2, like the D2 system. He comes up, he does amazing at, Drake in his 1 year, makes a tournament, wins a game against a Power 5 team. Sturts goes off. He has a great time. And the transfer from Drake to Iowa, that's telling the road. There really isn't much of a true major mix. Sturts comes along, he brings in multiple other Drake players who can fill that cohesive role, and he brings in other guys from the portal, and the team looks good. I think they're definitely a top 25 team coming in. They should compete well in the Big Ten. I think Sturts could be a Big Ten Player of the Year candidate. He actually should be, I should say. And I think he has a great upside. He's the number 2 prospect coming in the transfer portal. And don't be surprised if Iowa is in that conversation later in the year of being a Final Four team, because they definitely feel like it, in my opinion, right now.
Yeah, no, I'm not necessarily as high on Iowa as you are. I definitely think they're going to be really, really good this year. And in terms of Bennett Sturts, I mean, there's might not be a player in the country that knows better to what his coach wants than Bennett. I mean, he's played for Ben McCollum for a while now. He knows exactly how McCollum wants his offense to be ran. And between Bennett Sturts and Brendan Housen, you could make the argument that might be the best shooting backcourt in the country going to this year. And Bennett Sturts, the way he plays, is almost like video game like at times. I mean, just watching that run he had at Drake this past season. And yeah, I am really excited to see how a lot of these Drake transfers translate to the high major level. Of course, they did it well going from D2 to D1. We'll see if they can jump another level and prove to the rest of the country that they are no fluke in college basketball.
Easily. And I think even beyond that, look at Valgo Corvieras. He went to Robert Morris. That was a team that made the tournament as a 15 seed, almost upset Alabama. So definitely additional depth when there needs to be. Just a team that you really got to consider.
Right. Most definitely. And I think that's pretty much going to take care of everything we have on this episode today. Of course, you might not agree with us if we have some teams higher than what you think or teams lower than what you think, but these are just our personal picks. We're trying to make some predictions right now as to what we think is going to transpire in this season of college basketball. Really, really excited for all the teams to watch that we named today. And again, really good getting some of the big name players back in the draft. But again, that pretty much takes care of everything that we have for this episode today. If you, again, please engage with the content as always, if possible. And until next episode, we'll see you all next time.
Peace.